Thank you all for joining us for the Wednesday, July 13th, 2022 meeting of the Human Services Committee. We have a quorum, and with Councilmember Hedekadis, Burns, and myself present. We will move right into the agenda. May I have approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of June 6th? Moved by Councilmember Hedekadis, seconded by Councilmember Burns. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, any abstentions? Great. That will move us into public comment. We will start with folks who Oh, my apologies. Can we have a motion to, and thank you. I'd like to entertain a motion to reconsider the minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Hedekadis, seconded by Councilmember Burns. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We are reconsidering the minutes, and thank you, Ms. White, for noting Councilmember Ravel made an amendment. I know she sent it to us. I think it was sent to everyone, the amendment. Staff knows what that amendment is. It is that she voted no on a number of at least one ordinance, and so we have those notes. It will be corrected by Ms. White, and so can someone move that amendment, Councilmember Ravel's amendment to the minutes? Moved by Councilmember Hedekadis, seconded by Councilmember Burns. On the amendment, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed, any abstentions? Okay, the amendment to the minutes passes, and now to the actual minutes as amended. All those in favor? Aye. All right. All those opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Now we are on to public comment. And we'll first start with the folks who have signed up in person. I imagine there are folks online who want to speak as well. But we'll start with the folks who are in person. And we'll start with Ms. Bogg.
Good afternoon, members of the Human Services Committee. My name is Betty Bogg. I'm the Executive Director of Connections for the Homeless. I'm here tonight to clarify the facts around the incident at the Margarita Inn on July 5th, which involved one of our residents, the son of the Margarita Inn's owner, and ultimately the police. Many of the details about the incident reported in the media, in public meetings, and on social media are incorrect. Whatever actions the resident took at the hotel, the specifics of which are still in dispute, here are the facts that the Commission should be aware of. First, the incident did not take place outside of the Margarita Inn, on a public street, or in the front yard of the building. Second, there were no children present in the hotel lobby where the incident did occur at any time during the event. What is also true is that the situation was not handled according to our policies or according to our agreement with the owner. As you know, the Margarita Inn is staffed with multiple professionals who are specifically trained to de-escalate stressful or intense situations. All participants staying at the Margarita Inn have experienced homelessness, which means all of them have experienced trauma, and many have experienced significant trauma as victims of violence and crime. That's why the Margarita Inn is so important. It gives people a chance to catch their breath, organize their lives in a safe and supportive environment, and ultimately move to a stable living arrangement. Things did not go as planned on July 5th. While we are still investigating the details of what triggered the confrontation, it is accurate to say that the owner's son saw behavior he didn't feel was appropriate and confronted the resident. Having a non-staff member confront a participant is not how we agreed to partner with the owner and his staff. Rather, we agreed that any concerns from the owner's staff would be directed to a Connections staff person. At the same time, we understand the concerns of the owner's son, and we will work with the owner and his team to make sure everyone is clear on our agreed upon process going forward. Unfortunately, the escalation was such that the police had to be called. The resident was arrested and removed from the Margarita, where he will no longer be allowed to return. That is the right decision based on what happened. The safety of our residents, staff, and neighbors is our top priority. At the same time, we regret that we won't have a chance to help that former resident get the help he so desperately needs. Prior to that incident, we worked with the young man for a year and a half, 1 year at the Margarita and 6 months prior to that at our drop-in. And we had no significant incidents, certainly not violent ones, that involved him. He had recently been matched for a housing placement that had accompanying supportive services and was awaiting final paperwork, which, when completed, would have allowed him to exit homelessness. That housing opportunity is now forfeited and will be even more difficult to obtain when he eventually exits the criminal justice system. None of us are naive about the challenges people experiencing homelessness face, nor the challenges faced by the communities in which they live. Ending homelessness isn't easy, but one thing we do know for certain, homelessness doesn't just go away if you ignore it. We have to face it and to fix it. Connections will continue its work to do just that and to include the Margarita Inn and a new, exciting, and innovative model with which to do so. As always, if you have any questions, you should not hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bogg. Next for in-person is John Cleve. Yes, sorry. Yes, John Cleve.
No worries. And what I'm here to say, if you don't mind, can I take the mask off? Ultimately might be preempted because Jonathan informed me that you might be tabling the move of
The comments are welcome.
All right, I'm sorry. So I'm here to talk specifically about Jonathan's proposal to the committee to move the 65022 shelters for the temporary homeless proposal to the full council. And I would like to be brief, but I do have, basically, I live at 1109 Grove. I'm about 3 doors away from the Margarita, and while this covers all things, all properties that wish to operate in this way, not just the Margarita, obviously I have firsthand exposure to what I've seen at the Margarita. And I do believe that the licensing that's being proposed by the city and that I believe you had a hand in drawing up is strong because, as Betty said, we all care about fixing a serious problem that we have, not only in this community, but in all communities. And what we're trying to do is find a balance between what we're doing there and the 700 odd residents that live with close to it, and that many of which, or at least a good proportion of which, have had problems over the past 2 years in the way that Connections has run it. So there was an incident on Monday. Ultimately, as she said, it was handled by the son of the owner of the property and not by a staff member. Nonetheless, the problem did occur. Not the first problem that's occurred there. They've had several arsons. They've had other things. So I'm hoping that what the license does is says, rather than just trust that Connections is going to do a good job, we have legal remediation, that we can say, this is the standards that the community has agreed that you operate within, and that ultimately we can get along in that respect, that we don't just do trust, it's trust plus verify, and that ultimately the license is there. So having read through the license several times and actually having given some input to it with Kelly, I do have a few things that you might consider adding to the license to, I think, help achieve that balance between us doing the greater good that we all want to do and protecting the community and the neighbors that are there. I don't know, I made copies of this. I probably should have submitted it earlier. I don't know if I can just hand you guys copies to have with it. Yeah, and I won't take up people's time by going through it item by item, but what I think that I've added are areas like the quote about preference for Evanston residents. It would be great if it were aimed exclusively at people who previously resided there. The idea that they have staff is written in there, but it would be great if it were licensed staff, because this is a very high needs population, as we know. Having somebody who has just been seen an hour PowerPoint that tells them how to behave is not sufficient to deal with a very high risk population. I think there should be arguments about the staff that are servicing the thing, and as well a few other areas, particularly the area of the cooperation with police, because we've seen incidents where the police have been in the conduct of criminal investigations and have been thwarted numerous times getting in there. So if we can add language around that. So you can read through this. It's a short document. I feel that does strike that correct balance between the two sides of it. So I appreciate you guys giving me time today.
Thank you. And if you have one extra copy of your thing, I figure there's someone right behind you that might want a copy if you want to share. Ms. Bogg may want a copy. Thank you. And that takes us to folks who are online. I do not know everyone that's online that wants to give public comment, but I certainly see a face that I'm quite sure wants to give public comment. So, Mr. Dillow, Christopher, feel free to go.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time today. So for public record and for this audience, I want to make sure that everyone's aware that a conversation with the 4th Ward Alderman yesterday, he reported to me, and I quote, "Everyone knows that this license that's before you today is being created for Connections for the Homeless, and that the timing of this proposal, while it is extraordinarily incomplete, is aligned with Connections for the Homeless's attempt to purchase the building." So while I don't know everything about the contract, I'm reporting to you what the 4th Ward Alderman reported to me, which is extremely disturbing on its face. To be clear, the Alderman is asking this body to put the interests of Connections for the Homeless before our community and rubber stamping an inadequate license agreement that is destined to alter the landscape of the 4th Ward and any future ward on. And they're putting it in front of you without having input from impacted community stakeholders. This audience right here, police, fire, neighbors, neighboring businesses, health, mental care services, addiction services, all of which have been burdened incredibly over the last 2 years, and will continue to be so, and have not been a part of what this license is going to be. There has been no short or long-term impact studies. We have no idea the financial impact of creating a license such as this and how Margarita Inn is going to use it. I mean, we could look historically and see what the costs are, but there's been no study to do that. There's been no community impact study. What's the crime going to look like? The fire, there have been arsons there, the property values, mental health issues, economic impact to businesses. So what does it do when you take a facility like this next to other facilities like this? And what does it do to the 4th Ward from an economic standpoint? Have they been consulted? Do we have expert advice? So as far as I could tell, and talking with Mr. Cleve and others, there's been no experts that have weighed in. We've had the alderman and supposedly the staff, but they're not experts on writing a license such as this or developing a homeless shelter or looking across. I have, John Cleve has, and many other have, said, hey, this is great examples of how this has worked throughout the country. But yet we just have this kind of light framework, straw man, whatever you want to call this, that's being presented here at this time for a very specific reason. This expert advice couldn't be, tenant capacity. Like, we already know that aggregating large numbers of vulnerable people in the same place fails. That's a failed experiment throughout the country. It's failed in Chicago and it's failed in every city. Everyone says disperse, but here we're trying to put them all in the same place. Staff to resident ratios, standards, benchmarks, operations, community outreach, partnering, vetting. None of these things have had experts weigh in to say, here, this is the benchmark. This is what's worked. This is how it's handled in places across the country, where this has been successful. Here's where I'm particularly concerned is that references to safeguards that have been excluded from prior homeless ordinances, because this directly caters to corrections for the homeless, because these are things that cannot be solved by the Margarita Inn. Proximity to schools, proximity to like facilities. They can't solve that, so that's not in this license, but yet it is in the current homeless or temporary housing statutes in the city of Evanston. So, I'm thinking that's still probably a good idea. Also special use criteria is not included in here, including causing negative cumulative effect, considering in conjunction with cumulative effects of various special uses of other types in the immediate neighborhood, which we have heard time and time again from NUSMA that the 4th Ward is particularly burdened with this amount of types of facilities, far more than any other ward in the city. Doesn't interfere or diminish the value of property in the neighborhood, is adequately served by public facilities and services. We have no idea. I'm sorry?
I'm going to ask you to start wrapping up in the next 20 seconds.
Oh, I'm totally going to wrap up. I only have two more things to say. And finally, and probably most importantly, no safeguards would have prevented the sexual abuse of a child or children. And I'm sorry, Betty, but I prefer to go with what the police said and what the folks on the ground said, that there were children there. Just because you say it's not doesn't make it so, which occurred last Tuesday. There's no vetting written into the license, and there's no limiting by population or gender or family. So basically what happened last Tuesday would happen again and again. And if the police weren't there, or if it was managed by somebody on staff, we would never hear about it. I'm going to say this. The last thing I'm going to say is the Fourth Ward Alderman right now is subverting the function of this committee by submitting an incomplete proposal to achieve the goals of a private organization, to make a private real estate deal. This cannot stand. We are better than this. This is on its face so inappropriate that we're even here today looking at this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else online signed up for public or that wants to give public comment?
I would like to say something as take a point of privilege if we don't have anyone else.
Yeah, let's just check. It seems as if there is no one else that would like to give public comment. If you would, please unmute yourself and present yourself. Otherwise, Councilmember Burns.
And I don't know if this is something that Chief Eddington can speak to, but what was just shared was shared a few nights ago about the circumstances around the recent Margarita incident in Margarita Inn, and what are the facts? And because I think we are owed it, the public is owed it, and I like working off facts. And I just want to make it clear, because what we've been shared is very disturbing, and we just need to know what it is and what it isn't. Thank you.
Council member, if I may make the suggestion, the complete police report is on my desk. I'll be happy to get it. I would prefer to read it verbatim rather than try and remember, because I think there's some specifics in there that I don't want to mess up by just talking off the top of my head. So if we could delay this discussion, give me 20 minutes to get there and back, and I'll be right back with it.
And I just would like for that to get out to the public. Again, if this is something that's going to be repeated over and over and over again, I think this body is owed it, and also the public, just to know what the facts are. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. I'll see you shortly, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who's seeking to give public comment? Seeing no one else seeking to give public comment, that brings us to, given that we're going to wait on, okay, with that, we are going to switch the order of the agenda a bit to move up the ordinance regarding, so I'm seeking a motion on ordinance 65022, modifying Title 8, Chapter 17, shelters for the temporarily homeless. May I have a motion? So moved by Councilmember Hericades.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Burns. I would like to bring Councilmember Nusma, who is here in the audience and who made this referral, to walk through it and make statements.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Reed and colleagues on the committee, Director Ogbo. I'm Jonathan Nusma, council member representing the 4th Ward. I did make this referral to create this license. And I would like to take a few minutes and talk about the larger context in which this license is going to play a part. But before I do that, I would like to request that the item before us tonight, HS4, be tabled, because it does need some more work. As you know, this is a body that can't get anything done without multiple swings at it. It took us 5 tries to get a commercial vehicle parking license done. So this is significantly more important than that. I'd like to take the time that we need to do it right. Appreciate Councilmember Burns for requesting that factual clarification from the police chief. That will be informative for this discussion. But larger context here is the problem with homelessness that exists around the country and here in Evanston. And we're seeing those, those national trends play out here in this context as we are in many other areas as well. I'm not here to talk about homelessness as a problem. I will point out that everyone I've talked to, neighbors near and far, close to the Margarita Inn, everyone agrees that homelessness is a problem and we need to do something about it. And in a certain sense, the solution to homelessness is really easy. Give people a place to stay and they would no longer be homeless. And we've known this for years. For example, a quote, the consolidated plan, which was approved by the City Council in January of 2010, quote, additional transitional and permanent supportive housing beds and units are needed for both individuals and families. A lot more to it than that, but just one indication that we have known about this problem for years. And here we are in 2022. We find ourselves with a historic opportunity in front of us to do the right thing and to solve a problem that's been intractable in our community for decades, and at least to start to solve the problem. And I'd like us to seize this opportunity to live up to our values of inclusivity and equity that we all say we hold dear as a community. And I'd like us to put our values into action and take advantage of this opportunity. As we do this, we are going to have to do it right. And that means that the community has to be on board and be comfortable with the arrangements that we're coming up with and the arrangements that, as we move forward. And we do have some work to do, as evidenced by the public comment we have heard tonight. And we have some work to do before I'm going to be comfortable voting to approve anything. So we do have some time to close the gap between the perceptions and the reality. We're making some progress on that tonight. And so that's important for one thing, but also once we can agree on a reality, if needs to be changed or modified, we need to be able to do that as well. So I'm looking forward to doing the right thing, and that means that the city has to have strong regulatory oversight over any operation doing this kind of work to ensure that the needs of the residents being served inside the facility are being met, and also to ensure that the needs of the neighbors in the community are also being met. So in order to accomplish this objective, we are moving forward, or I intend to move forward at least, with a 3-pronged approach. First leg of that approach is the zoning process, and we went through some discussion a few months ago to kind of clarify what that zoning process would look like or is going to look like for the Margarita Inn. So we've confirmed that what their process is going to be. Connections has not submitted an application yet. When they do, that process will follow the same procedure as any other special use. First, it would go to the Land Use Commission, then to the Planning and Development Committee, and then ultimately to the City Council. So to put some timeline on that, even if Connections submitted the application tomorrow, it wouldn't make it to the Land Use Commission until October, and not till the full council, probably until sometime towards the end of the year. That's if everything kind of went smoothly. And so there's ample opportunity for public engagement, within that process and outside of that process as well. With any special use, there will be conditions attached, and I would like 2 of those special conditions to be the other 2 legs of this 3-legged stool. The second leg is what we're talking about, or what we're not going to talk about tonight, is this license structure. And part of doing this right means defining what doing it right means. So getting into the details that Mr. Dillo was referring to, the staffing ratios, program requirements, admissions requirements, security obligations, and so forth. I don't need to write the regulations right now. That's what we're in the process of doing. And once we put these into place with a license, that license that'll have real teeth, that will provide the city with the ongoing oversight and authority that we need to make sure that the residents inside the facility and the neighbors next door, that their needs are all being met. We have some time. I'd like to take the time to do this right and not rush it through the process. So I'm just reiterating a request that we table this to make sure we are getting some input from various stakeholders, including some independent subject matter experts, so that we can make the community feel as comfortable as possible that we are approaching this diligently. Go on just for another minute or two. The third leg of the stool is the Good Neighbor Agreement. This is a concept that Connections themselves brought to the table, and we're working with Connections to kind of initiate this process. Connections is going to be hosting small group meetings over the next few months with neighbors, residents, stakeholders to make sure that everybody's concerns are addressed. We'll be signing up people in advance. The meetings, we're planning to hold them at the Margarita Inn, which will be an opportunity for folks to see inside the building and get a feeling for what it's really like. And we're going to culminate this series of small group meetings with a larger neighborhood community meeting in September, which will be kind of a report back community, and the Good Neighbor Agreement will evolve out of that. So the Good Neighbor Agreement will kind of establish some mutual expectations for the community and for Connections, establish some reporting channels. And I think the Good Neighbor Agreement should be a condition of that special use. So in closing, I just want to acknowledge that the work that Connections for the Homeless has been doing in our community for decades is important work. It's work that we need them to be doing. As a community, they are looking out for our best interest in serving the needs of our entire community by doing the work that they do. They've been collaborative throughout this process and have been willing to make changes when we've discussed them, and I have no reason to believe that they will not be willing to make further changes should we require them as this process unfolds. And so just to reiterate, I'm looking forward to solving this problem in our community in such a way that we can all be proud of, in such a way that it becomes a feature of the community that everyone is comfortable with. We need to do this right, and let's take the time to do that right. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any comment from, it's for action, but yeah, but so is there any discussion at this time?
Has there been
There's not been a motion, so if you want
to table it? No, thanks for the update. The only thing I would encourage from the community, no matter how you feel about this issue, is to participate. And in any good negotiation, you can expect that there's going to be trade-offs and compromises on both sides. And if either side doesn't want that, it's not a good faith negotiation. And if you're not willing to negotiate in good faith, then you might as well just make that clear and say, look, I just don't want this at all, period, under any circumstances. Or from a connection standpoint, look, we're coming in hot no matter how you want it, and we're not willing to make any changes and improvements. And so it has to be good faith. And again, what comes with meaning you're not going to get everything on here, most likely. You know what I mean? And that's true in any deal, whether it's a real estate deal or this type of deal. So I just want to continue to encourage that, because there's some really good ideas in here. And what I've seen happen historically in Evanston is people are like, look, it's either all or nothing. And then they miss out opportunities to get some of this stuff in there, right? So just keep participating and we'll get there. We'll get there. That's all.
Thank you.
So
Hold on one second.
Yeah.
Council member. Maybe one day if you want to run in Chicago or somewhere. Director Ogbo.
So I just want this message to serve as a reminder that the next Human Services meeting is August 1st. That leaves us 2 weeks for us to draft sort of a new ordinance. I don't know if that will be ample time for that, or we can table it for the September meeting.
Yeah, so this will not be coming back at August 1st, so folks, to be clear, we are going to table this, and it will come back at some future date, much further out than 2 weeks or 4 weeks or anything like that. It'll come back at some point. So may I have a motion to table this item? No. We're just going to table it. I move to table this item. I move to table item HS4, ordinance 65022.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Great. Okay. That moves us back to our regular agenda. Thank you. So that moves us back to our regular agenda. And so may I have a motion on HS1?
Motion approval of the 2022 Emergency Solutions Grant Funding recommendations.
Second.
Great. It's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item, or do we have staff here that want to give any presentation? Sarah, are you looking at, or just respond to questions if there are any? Anybody have any? No? Okay, yeah. So then, seeing no discussion on this item, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Wonderful. That brings us to HS2, approval of $500,000 of ARPA funding for a child care workforce retention program. May I have a motion?
A motion approval of item HS2.
Is there a second?
Well, let me read it.
I just read
Oh,
it.
you just read it?
I just
Okay,
read
missed
it.
that, sorry.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Hedikatis. Is there any discussion on this item? Okay. Well, I will just say that I think this is an interesting program. What we'll be doing is providing essentially, it's hazard pay essentially for childcare workers in order to help have retention. So this is a neat program, and the city is funding it, and looking forward to seeing this come to council. All those in favor?
I'll say one other
okay.
thing. It's just if there's anything the city can do to advocate, and I don't know if this is at the state level or where this is, just for increased pay for this particular, for members in this profession generally, I'd love for us to get involved at that level. This is a really important gesture, but I think to ensure stability within this profession, we need to figure out a way to increase their compensation, and however the city can get involved in that, I think we should.
Minimum wage is how we can get involved in that. But yeah, and other ways that we can do, we can also use other methods. And I agree. I think that wages in the childcare profession have been stagnant for a while, and particularly given inflation and the pandemic, I think, part of the reason we are seeing an issue retaining the workforce in a whole host of areas, but particularly in childcare, is because of the low wages and the immense amount of work associated with these kinds of jobs. Seeing no further discussion on this item, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, any abstentions? The ayes have it. Wonderful. I'd like to skip one item for us. I'd like to skip a few items for a second and go to HS1, which is review. I'm sorry? No, I'm sorry. HS1 and items for communication. I want to skip down to that now. And so that is the review of the Evanston Police Complaints and Comments Report.
Chairman, committee members, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
We're here to give you a summary of 2 complaints involving the Evanston Police Department. The first one that I will be referencing is DI 21-02. Start with summary of facts. The accused officers witnessed a fight between juveniles while they were on stationary patrol, the 1600 block of Foster by Fleetwood Jourdain. The accused officers exited the squad car, separated the teens, and placed them in cuffs, then in 2 separate squad cars, and the juvenile detectives were called to arrive on scene and assist. The juvenile suspects were taken to the Evanston Police Department. A patrol sergeant initiated a use of force investigation. In the interview involving that investigation, there was no guardian or parent present. The juvenile's family spoke with the patrol sergeant, and both juveniles were released to their families. The allegations: the complaint alleged that the accused officers dragged and then kicked one of the juveniles. They were kicked in the head and they were sore due to the incident. The complaint further alleged that the accused officer smirked at the complainant when she spoke about the incident. The complaint also alleged that the sergeant interviewed the child without permission, without a guardian present. So with regards to the allegations against the accused officers 1 and 2, their actions were found to be within policy. The juvenile was not kicked, the use of force was reviewed, and the investigation, the use of force was found to be within policy. With regards to the accused sergeant, their actions were reviewed. The first layer of review attributed to part of this to a policy failure and recommended shift level training. At the next level was a sustained complaint with a recommendation of a written reprimand. This then went to the chief of police, who concurred that the complaint was sustained with regards to not having a parent present for the interview, and a written reprimand was issued. This investigation was also reviewed by CPRC. They found it to be complete, thorough, and objective, and they moved it forward 5-0 to be reviewed tonight. With that, do I have any questions about DI 21-02?
Councilmember Burns.
The allegation that someone was kicked in the head, that was, there was body camera video showing that did not take place. There was adequate recording throughout this entire encounter that.
Yeah, not only was there police body worn camera footage, there was also footage from private cell phones that we were able to review. Reviewing all those in their totality revealed that there was no kicking of the juvenile by the officer.
Thank you.
No problem. You're welcome.
Thank you. If there's no for Councilmember Hadikatis.
So in the report, there's on page 4, it talks about the policy about interviewing juveniles with or without a guardian. It mentioned that the policy is not clear. Is that something that our department is working on, kind of clarifying so that there's less? Yeah.
The short answer is yes. So part of this review was, I believe, could best summarize supporting the written reprimand was taking the totality of the entire, even though that the policy may have been deemed to be vague, there's an expectation that policy is not going to dictate every decision, and people, especially sergeants, should be able to make decisions based on how the circumstances. The written was issued because we felt that decision making fell short. Now, with regards to, has the policy been changed? And yes, for such as administrative investigation as the use of force, there is clear direction in the policy that if a juvenile is involved, that guidance mirrors what's required by law with a criminal investigation involving a juvenile.
Great, thank you.
No problem. Thank you. You're welcome.
Yeah, I have, thank you, one question. Has the body-worn camera footage been reviewed by our civilian police board?
Yes, it is a practice that we encourage. We think that for the board to be effective and to be able to render a decision that an investigation is complete, thorough, so on and so forth, that reviewing body-worn camera footage is important. So yes, the body-worn camera footage was reviewed by the commission.
As well as the other footage that you all had access to, the cell phone video?
I believe that it was. I can't remember directly off the top of my head, but yes, we
Would
had
normally
the
present the
review
full
of video
record to
that
the-
we felt showed that incident, that part of the incident.
Real quick, just on that, is that
Councilmember Burns.
information, is that information now kind of automatically provided to the committee, or do they still need to request, to view the video and then they find time to come to the police department, or is it included in, in their packet in some secure,
So
Like-
in standing this committee up in the past, we felt it very important that the body-worn camera footage be viewed. So as part of preparing these investigations reviewed by CPRC, we get the body-worn camera footage ready for review, appropriate redactions, and so on and so forth. And then the committee moves into executive session to review that, and then comes back out of executive session to discuss what they observe. So we make every effort. We feel that it's very important that if the city has invested this kind of money in the body-worn camera program, that we feel it's that important. It has to be important everywhere, and it has to be important in this review process.
that's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that concludes questions on that particular item.
Very good. So with that, I'm going to move on to CR 21-03. We'll start with a summary of the facts. The accused officer witnessed the complainant neglecting to perform a full stop at a stop sign. That officer initiated a traffic stop. The accused officer discovered that 3 children sitting in the back seat were not properly secured in their child seats. The accused officer initiated an investigation regarding the child safety restraint violation that they observed. All parties were calm during the traffic stop. The complainant asked the officer a question with regards to child seats. In response to the question that the officer was asked, the officer asked if he could look at the child seats and looking to assist in answering the complainant's question. The accused officer did not specifically wait for an answer of yes or no. The accused officer inspected the safety belt, demonstrated the belt was loose and not secure, but there was no physical contact between the officer and the complainant's children. The complainant was issued citations for child safety seat violations and neglecting to perform a full stop at the stop sign. The accused officer, as part of the stop, gave information to the complainant to find assistance for securing child safety seats and warned the complainant of the potential danger of not having children correctly secured in their seat while driving. All parties left the traffic stop without further incident, and later in court the driver pled guilty. The allegation is the complainant alleged that he did not run the stop sign. The accused officer entered his vehicle without his permission, and the accused officer made physical contact with his children. The complainant further stated that he did not feel safe during the traffic stop and that his children were scared. The officer was exonerated and his actions were found to be within policy, almost primarily due to the fact the investigation just did not support the complainant's perception of events. This was also reviewed by CPRC. They found it to be complete, thorough, objective, and fair, and the commission moved this investigation forward to this committee by a 5-0 vote. And the chief of police also found the officer's actions to be within policy. So with that, are there any questions that I could answer?
Seeing no questions on that item, good on that one.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, those are the police complaints. We are ready to, since we're here at items for communication, might as well knock out the last item for communication and then move back to the regular order of business. So that is HS2. I'm not sure why it's an item for communication, but we can communicate. Chief Cook, Chief Cook, Chief Eddington. He's a bit more tan.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I think where we left off was I committed to read the report verbatim. I'll probably skip some of the formal names and we'll go from there. Also, in the context of this report is a preamble. The officer who's preparing this report is also using this report to justify or to lay the body or the elements of the crime for aggravated battery against police officers.
I'm sorry. When I say HS2, my apologies. We are on items for communication, distribution of the portion of the daily crime bulletin that includes the names and addresses of persons. Oh, you went out to get the information. Yeah, so do you want that information now? It's up to you, Mr. Chair. Well, let's start with Councilmember Burns, who wanted an update. So while the folks are still here and there's an audience, let's maybe work on the facts. So we're going back to the discussion during public comment about issues that took place at the Margarita Inn recently, and there were some assertions made both in public comment at council on Monday, and then again here, Councilmember Burns was seeking clarification about the facts of the case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The report starts, officers' names and star numbers were Cortez and Hicks. The response was to 1566 Oak Avenue. Response date and time was 7/5 at approximately 18:25 hours. The nature of the call was a battery, and these events were recorded on body-worn cameras. In summary, while in full uniform responding to the Margarita Inn located at 1566 Oak Avenue in the city of Evanston on 7/5/22 at approximately 18:50 hours in reference to a battery that occurred there. Upon our arrival, a white male yelled, "That's him," pointing at a male black standing in the lobby area. I spoke to the male black, who identified himself. After he identified himself, he advised he and the white male were in a physical altercation prior to our arrival and wanted the white male arrested for striking him. The white male identified himself to Officer Lang, who was also on scene. While conducting our interviews, the first individual began to yell at us in an aggressive manner, continued to yell and aggressively point at Officer Hicks in the face. Officer Hicks advised that individual that if he did not stop, he would be placed in handcuffs. The individual remained uncooperative with us and began to flee by running up a flight of stairs. I went to grab that individual's arm, but grabbed the back of his T-shirt instead, attempting to prevent escape. The subject then turned around and struck me in the face with a closed fist while trying to escape and holding onto my shirt. Officer Hicks observed the strike being conducted and deployed a taser so that the individual would stop striking me and also stop that individual from making an escape. Officer Hicks observed that the first taser deployment was ineffective and deployed a second round, which was effective. I then placed Shelby in custody without further incident. EFD arrived on the scene to remove the prongs from the individual who had been tased. The evidence technicians were requested and recovered the taser cartridges and photographed the scene. The ET also took photographs of the arrested individual and the officer who was battered. The person who was tased was transported to Evanston Hospital via EFD ambulance, where he was seen by a doctor and found that individual to be in good condition and was released. He was transported back to the EPD without incident. I interviewed the second individual at EPD, and he advised of the following. That individual identified himself as a service manager at Margarita Inn. During his shift, he observed the other individual in the kitchen touching his private parts. He was asked, that individual, to stop because there were children present, and a verbal altercation ensued between the two individuals. During the verbal altercation, the first individual struck the service manager about the face, and a physical altercation ensued between the two individuals. The service manager said he also struck back in self-defense. The service manager had visible redness and some swelling on his face and had some scratch marks on his neck. The service manager was willing to pursue charges and sign a complaint for battery. However, he refused medical attention and advised he would take himself to the hospital at a later time. His injuries were photographed by the evidence technician. An employee of the Margarita Inn provided us with the video of the incident between the two individuals. This video has been uploaded into evidence.com. Felony Review was contacted on 7/6/22 at 15 hours, and the ASA approved felony charges against the individual for aggravated battery to a police officer. This concludes the report.
Councilmember Burns.
So this incident started in a kitchen there, did I get that right?
Yes, sir.
And then the service manager claims that he went up to this person and said, there are, stop doing this thing because there are children present in the kitchen or just in the hotel or the Margarita Inn, generally speaking?
I don't want to put words in his mouth. My inference from the report is there's somebody in proximity involved,
So there was
somebody in the area.
There was a child in the kitchen.
That was the perception of the service manager. But I'll wait and look at the videotape for that.
But that hasn't been confirmed yet.
No,
Whether or not there was
I
a
haven't seen the
child
tape.
in the kitchen. Okay. Because that's an odd place for a child to be. I know the Margarita Inn, again, serves families, and so it would make some sense if there were children in the building, but a child in the kitchen. I just want to make sure that see if that has been confirmed yet. From what the community member is suggesting is that is confirmed. Has that been confirmed yet?
Not by me.
Okay.
And so once again, I know what the service manager's comments were that would lead one to believe that there were at least a child in proximity where this was going on. But I haven't seen the video. I don't know.
And that kind of, quite literally, we're going to be talking about something similar. That form of public indecency in front of a minor would be a felony. To undergo that act in front of a minor would be a felony sex crime?
I'm not sure that it would be a felony. I think it would fall in the category of criminal sexual abuse. But before we would consider charging that, we're going to need a little more information.
So seemingly, we didn't have enough information to charge the person with that crime. Because if someone is doing what was accused in front of a minor, I want that person charged with the crime. And so seemingly, we didn't have enough information to charge him with the crime?
At that point, no. I think after the investigators review the videotape, we may develop enough information to proceed.
Okay, yeah, well, certainly interested in seeing where this goes.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Okay, with that, are you interested in, I don't know if Connections, the folks, the operators, have anything maybe that you all know from your firsthand that you would like to share based on your knowledge?
I can share generally. I was not present that evening, but no participants are allowed in the kitchen at any time. All of the people who were present that have talked about the incident said it happened in the lobby of the building. Of course, someone could have misspoken or somebody could have misheard something. I just confirmed that we have a single 12-year-old present in the hotel building. And I have checked with multiple staff to verify that no minors were present during the time of the confrontation or immediately preceding it. That's what I know.
Okay, so you know that there's one 12-year-old, from the best of your knowledge, that 12-year-old was not present during the altercation.
That's correct.
Okay.
And there would, just so you know, we are all mandated reporters.
Yeah.
So if there was some kind of abusive activity happening, we would be required to report it. And kids are not allowed to just be in the lobby or the kitchen. No participants go in the kitchen.
I just want to just play it back that, again, the investigation is ongoing. It has not been confirmed that there was a child either in the kitchen, the lobby, or anywhere in the same room as this activity. The investigation is ongoing, and that will hopefully we'll have more information soon. And if that is not correct, Chief, please correct me, but is that correct? Okay, thank you. Let the record show he said I am correct, just in case folks couldn't hear him. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bogg. Thank you, Councilmember Burns. Okay, this brings us back to the, I'd like to go through the items for discussion quickly. I think the plan for most of these is to, the city used to have, or actually I was just looking this up the other day, it doesn't seem like that committee was ever officially dissolved from what I can see, the alternatives to arrest. So the city has or had an alternatives to arrest committee, and a number of the discussion items we're planning to move to that committee. So we'll just quickly move through that, and then we'll move to the last item for consideration. And so that would be item HS 1 under items for discussion, HS 2 under items for discussion. I'd like to move those two items, HS 1 and HS 2, Ordinance 540222, modifying Title 9, Chapter 5, Section 18, for resisting or interfering with police, as well as Ordinance 55022, deleting Title 9, Chapter 5, Section 14, reckless conduct. And I'd like to move that we table those items and that we refer those items to the alternatives to arrest committee is what I would like to do.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Burns.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Hericades. But before we do that, I do have for Chief Cook, again, I don't know why I said that, Chief Eddington, quick questions on these items. Particularly HS2, and also for our legal counsel. I'm sorry, I should have done this toward the beginning of the meeting. We have Julie Tappendorf, and please let me know if I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, Tappendorf or Tappendorf, here on the line from Ansel Glink, and she is filling in as our corporation counsel. So hello, Julie.
Hello, everyone.
Yes. Okay, so starting here, Chief Eddington, I'm looking at the ordinance 55022, and it says that, you know, someone may not throw or cast any stone upon any or missile upon any building, railroad car, tree, or other public or private property. One, how would we define, one, it's been termed in the media as rock throwing, so rocks aren't the same as stones, but how would we define a missile? What does that mean?
I would interpret in the context of this ordinance any object that's thrown.
An object that's thrown? Rather
than a rocket. It's
yeah, of course. Yeah. It means an object that's thrown. And then Council Tappendorf, would you agree with that? That in this context, we're looking at 55022, which is Title 9, Chapter 5, Section 14. That missile would mean an object that is thrown.
Yes. So there's, and I won't say it's a specific legal definition of missile, but it has been used in a more generic fashion, not as a rocket or some explosive, but
sure.
A missile being something that is some sort of an object that is being thrown.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I've seen that referenced before, and it is used more generically in that fashion.
And I was aware that it was not a missile, but the fact that it's an object that is thrown, I have in my hand a paper ball, and I just threw that paper ball in a public building so did I just violate that ordinance? Did I throw a missile in a public building, and violate this ordinance?
I don't think so. I mean, you know, we're wordsmithing this, but essentially, one of the things that I think is at the root of this entire series of ordinances is are the police over policing, and I think that we don't, and so we have these on the
Hold
books.
on. Yeah, I do want to just get there, and I'm wondering, Council Tappendorf, again, given the reading of this ordinance and the definition and the way you're saying that missile is used, throwing a paper ball and not hurting anyone, not causing any damage, would that seemingly violate this ordinance? Would that give rise for someone to be ticketed or arrested under this ordinance?
In my experience, it would be highly unlikely. That certainly is up to police discretion on what they charge and how they interpret an ordinance. I'm not aware of any sort of prosecution or charges or citations for throwing something that wouldn't create any.
Any harm or damage.
What is the intention of this is not to damage property. That's the intent of this. And, certainly a rock can cause damage, a stone or something else that could cause damage. But, a paper airplane presumably would not.
But and I agree that is the intent, and that is why I brought this up. So it seems that what you're saying is that there could be discretion, that an officer could say something as minor as throwing a paper airplane or a paper ball and not harming a single person, or even a small little pebble, taking it and skipping it across the lake, seemingly without creating, again, our ordinance doesn't say that there must be criminal damage. It does not say that, there must be either property damage or damage or harming another person. It seems that it's very loose in that, again, that simply throwing a paper ball or a paper airplane would be up to the discretion of an officer whether they chose to arrest. And so with this ordinance, my goal is just to tighten it up a bit and to make sure that, again, that we're mirroring state law and creating potentially an alternative to arrest. And so I'm happy not to delete this title, but certainly or I don't think the ordinance deleted it. I'm happy not to delete this, but to make it mirror state law, to make sure that it is that it's actual property damage that we're concerned about, and actual physically harming someone, and not simply casting a stone or missile in public. And so that is what I am seeking to do here with this ordinance, just create some clarity. Councilmember Burns.
I was going to say for the public that I think the part of the frustration on the public is that these cleanup type legislation and ordinance exercises oftentimes happen with very little media attention. And I think the reason why a lot of these measures have been so controversial is because they've been covered in the media and not necessarily covered in a manner that pays close attention to the details of the measures. And so I just want to apologize for that, a lot of this has risen to the point where it is confusing people in the public, and they're concerned and worried, and it is not supposed to unfold in this manner. These type of cleanup bills are supposed to be very routine, and which is why I recommended in a few meetings ago, not the Human Services Committee, but another meeting, I can't remember what it was. Was it Council?
Council on Monday.
That we refer these to the Alternatives to Arrest Committee, which Chief Evanston would be a member, as well as members of the public and law enforcement and other important areas that can help us all come to an agreement on these measures, so that once they get to council, there's already consensus and support. So, but thank you for that, Councilmember Reed. And
I just want to give credit. Well, you did recommend that previously, but also recently today, Councilmember Hedikotis reached out and also echoed your
excellent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think we're in agreement here. One last thing, just for clarity to the public, because again, folks were thinking that they could ride around throwing rocks if this ordinance were to be removed. So Chief Eddington, even without this ordinance, right? If this ordinance did not exist here, and someone threw a rock at another person, that person could still be charged with assault, correct? Or some
appropriate state charge.
Yes, they'd be charged with an appropriate. And the same thing if someone were to take a rock and throw it at a business and break their window or cause damage to the building, and still that person, even without this ordinance, could be charged under a state under state law.
That's accurate, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. So, again.
That's important for the public to understand that just because you strike an ordinance does not mean there's not another ordinance statute that would address that particular activity or crime. And so that's the level of detail that I think has been lost in some of the reporting around these issues, which has caused a lot of anxiousness and concern, rightfully so. So again, I want to apologize for the way it's been reported by some of our media, and encourage people to reach out to your alder person, not just Councilmember Reed, but myself. Use us as a resource to gain greater clarification on some of the measures that you see coming forward.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on this? So the motion is to refer this to the first meeting of the Alternatives to Arrest Committee, as either it is reestablished or as it is reestablished. So there's been a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, any abstentions? So that is HS1, and under items for discussion, HS1 and HS2 have been referred to the Alternatives to Arrest Committee as soon as they are recomprised and meet again. Then that brings us to HS3, which is Ordinance 56022, removing Title IX, Chapter 5, Section 18(1), obedience to police in public places. I may have a motion. I would like to have this continue on its path forward to council. This is an ordinance that has HS3 under items for discussion. Yes. So may I have?
So I'll just move. I move item HS3 under discussion. Ordinance 56022, removing Title IX, Chapter 5, Section 18-1, obedience to police in public places.
Thank you. Is there a second? I will second it. This ordinance is an ordinance that makes it unlawful to disobey police in a public place. Our ordinance fails to have a key word in it, which is in state law, which is the lawful order of a police officer. And I think because that key word lawful is missing in this ordinance, I think we need to either, again, what I do agree with now that we have approached this, my original lens with this was to get rid of laws that I saw as, not working well here, or either unconstitutional or, a whole host of things, creating negative opportunities for negative interactions with police and unnecessary negative interactions with our law enforcement. And I can point to, in the last 7 years, 2 high-profile cases where this single ordinance in particular was grossly misused. One involving myself when I was running for city clerk, and I was arrested for petitioning to get on the ballot to run for city clerk, and I was charged with nothing other than Ordinance 56. Other than this obedience to police in a public place, when in fact I did not disobey any lawful order of a police officer. I did refuse to present the officer with my birthday. But I didn't necessarily need a birthday gift from the officer, and so I didn't feel compelled to tell the officer my birthday, and that was within my rights, and yet I was charged with obedience, with not being obedient to a police officer in a public place. Lawrence Crosby, who is a Northwestern student, engineering PhD, was arrested for stealing, quote unquote, what turned out to be his own car. And was charged with obedience to police in a public place And Mr. Crosby did not come to administrative hearings. Mr. Crosby had a case at the Skokie Courthouse, and the city ended up paying out over $1.3 million, or $1.3 million to Mr. Crosby. And I think there's some confusion in the community that the large dollar amount was for, in the video, it is shown that an officer strikes Mr. Crosby, but that is not why Mr. Crosby received $1.2 or $3 million. Why the taxpayers of Evanston had to fork over $1.2 or $3 million. It was because of malicious prosecution, as well as his understanding that the city had tarnished his name with that prosecution and with making the case even more public. And so, again, this is an ordinance that has cost the city over $1 million, and it has put us at risk. One of the things that was mentioned at the last meeting as to why this ordinance was useful is because it creates alternative avenues to arrest using our local adjudication, administrative adjudication system. Chief Eddington, between this meeting and the last meeting, you shared data as a coming out of a request of that meeting was for additional data on this, and you shared data on this, and I believe the data show that there were roughly 22, that's what I thought, 22 arrests or citations for this ordinance, and when analyzing those, can you quickly run through the disposition of those cases?
Sure.
Thank you.
Not guilty 2, fine 2, SOL 6, supervision 2, ex parte 2, pending 4, expunged 2, dismissed 2.
What is SOL?
Stricken without leave. Or, I'm sorry, is that correct? Yeah. Okay, and you went through, I shouldn't have said quickly. Can you repeat that one more time?
Certainly, and I think, too, that we're talking about a time frame.
Well, actually, here's really what I want to, I'm sorry, and we're talking about a time frame of 5-6 years?
2017 to 2022.
Okay, from 2017 to now. So that's the time frame we're talking about, which that time frame does not include Mr. Crosby. It would, I think, include my arrest, because it wouldn't. In fact, it wouldn't even include my arrest in 2016 for obedience to police in a public place. So with this, you went through a number of various dispositions. There were, like 2 that were found not guilty. There were 6 that were dismissed, SOL, stricken without leave, and then there were a number of other dispositions. How many folks were actually found guilty of this?
2, 4. A specific finding of guilty, I see 4 because of that includes the 2 expungements. But I think that once we begin to delve into this and peel back the layers of the onion, these are often fellow traveler cases where there's an arrangement made, a package deal, if you will, to come to a resolution. And so to say specifically what happened with these, I'm not sure that's a clear picture, because there's usually other events going on, other charges that go with this,
but,
usually.
Yeah. So 4 out of the 22 were actually found guilty. So that's I wish our mayor was here and could give us a percentage, but that's a fairly low percentage. That's not even 20%. Yeah, thank you. So you said 13%? 18%. Yeah, that's what I figured. So we're somewhere close to that. So that's an 18% success rate, which actually put that another way. That is an 82% failure rate in some way, or loss rate. And then of those 22 cases, how many of those obedience to police in a public place, how many times was that the only charge the person received?
In 5 cases, there were no other charges.
So again, and so 4 out of the 22 were successfully prosecuted, and 5 out of the 22, again, a little over 20% in this case, were found, this was the sole charge. And that means that, and can you maybe walk through why someone would be only charged with this ordinance? If they.
Sure. First of all, I'm not agreeing with your math analysis of this because, as I said earlier, as they are combined with other charges.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into a thing about whether or not, they could have been found guilty with this, but just the hard, fast numbers, whether they were or were not, and certainly there's some nuance.
It's all about context and what you do for a living. And so, I'm sorry, your question was again, sir?
The question was, can you maybe walk through why someone would be charged only with this ordinance?
We're arresting somebody, we say, get out of the way, get out of the way, you don't get out of the way. That's an example of what this would be used for, if you're interfering in what we're attempting to accomplish.
But do we not, so we have another ordinance, resisting or interfering with police. Mm-hmm. Could they be charged with that?
Probably.
So then what, so that handles the scenario you just gave. So maybe can you give another scenario where this would be the only charge that someone would receive?
Order to disperse from a crowd control unit.
This is not on the agenda, but as going through the criminal code, we also have an ordinance on the books about dispersing a crowd in crowd control. Is that your recollection?
No, if you say it's there, I'm sure.
It's there. So maybe can we give another example that is not already covered by an ordinance?
Off the top of my head, no. I mean, the ordinance exists to address those issues that I would define as order maintenance.
Do you think, but certainly if an officer were to say, hey, to want to disperse a crowd, that would be a lawful order, correct?
There's, once again, a complicated situation. There has to be multiple warnings. There's a lot of stuff going on. But yes, eventually we could get to you're subject to arrest for noncompliance.
Do you think this ordinance could be improved by adding the word lawful?
Sure. And I think that I would default to our experience with the burglary tool discussion, that after we had a discussion and both sides came to realize what the other one was talking about, we came up with a solution. And so I think that adding that to mirror the state law is a perfect solution to your concerns.
And thank you. And then also, do you believe that if this ordinance did not exist, could you still ensure, the things you raise, that folks are following lawful? I'm sorry, here's what I was going to ask. I was trying to stall until my brain clicked back in again, and it did. So what I was going to ask there is, do you think that someone should be, that it makes sense for someone to be arrested solely for this ordinance violation?
Depending on the facts and circumstances, and two, once again, one of the things why I'm committed to defending the status quo is the ability to control this at the local level and have options.
An alternative to the state charge.
And once again, we're talking fingerprints, mugshots.
Sure.
We're taking an off ramp. We have the option for this off ramp out of the official criminal justice system to something we control.
And I have one last question, then I'll rest and go to Councilmember Burns. Would you be satisfied? One, so you've said that adding the word lawful you think is fine, a lawful order, and would help clarify this. Do you think it makes sense that this would just be a ticketable offense and someone wouldn't be arrested necessarily for this? And again, keeping in mind that there is an ordinance about resisting, interfering, and crowd control and all that other stuff. Do you think that that it would be fine for this to be a ticketable offense and a non-arrestable offense?
I think adding the ticketable option should remain an option. However, one of the things that I've asked my staff to work on is a flow chart of how this really goes. Because one of the things that we may decide to issue you a ticket. It may take us 15 or 20 minutes of figuring out what happened to get there, but that's an outcome. But it's not going to be like a speeding ticket where we walk up to the car. Everybody knows what's going to happen. The ticket's going to get issued. We're going to post the bond. We're done. We're signed for the ticket. We're gone. These may take a little more research in consultation with a supervisor, consultation with other senior officers. So it may not be as quick as I'm going to get out my ticket book and start writing. And so I want.
So you're saying that that people may need to be arrested in order, and I think are you working off the definition of arrest? I mean, once you guys detain someone, they are arrested, and you're saying that, and put handcuffs on them, that, there may be times where I think what I'm hearing you say is that it may help to, and this is what I think I'm hearing you saying, that it may help to arrest someone, have that time to figure out what the charge is, and then charge them with this potentially lesser charge? Is that what I'm?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And frankly, we go through that decision matrix all the time.
Okay. And Councilmember Burns.
No, I was just going to say, I think there's agreement here. I certainly understand what we're trying to accomplish, and as Chief Evanston said, I think similar to the burglar tools discussion, we can add, really simply by adding this word, provide better clarification that can help prevent, I think what we saw before in other instances that you provided examples for, where if in the moment, later on in the encounter, our police officers determine that, hey, what we thought happened due to, in one of the examples you gave, there was, a witness that thought they saw something, and so it allows our officers to get that new information as things develop, and to make decisions based on that new information, and to not move forward with charges if it's determined that some of the previous commands were unlawful. And so I think adding lawful in makes a lot of sense for me based on my current understanding. So I'm happy to move this forward.
Yeah, great. And then last question, Chief Cook, for me. Do you believe, I don't know why I'm stuck on saying that.
Chiefs are interchangeable.
Yeah,
It's okay.
I'm sorry. Do you believe that it would be also sensible that, again, since it has to be a lawful order and it almost requires that someone is breaking a law in order to disobey police in a public place, do you think it makes sense to ensure that this cannot be charged in and of itself, that there must be, in order to disobey a lawful order, you have to be breaking the law? So
I would have to give that some thought, sir, and I think I would probably avail myself to Corporation Counsel to parse that out. Because I think that the issuance of a lawful order, there's some event happening. This may be the only thing you didn't. Hey, it's time to leave. Please leave. You got to go. Please leave. And now we're up to you haven't complied.
I'm sorry. Say that again.
You get a series of warnings and don't leave. And this may be.
Don't leave where?
It's someplace you're not supposed to be.
Someplace you're not supposed to be.
Well, yeah,
which means
just can't walk up
illegally.
on the sidewalk and say leave. I mean,
Yeah, so you have to necessarily be breaking a law already.
No, there could be other issues. It could be you could be in the fire department could be engaged in a fire suppression activity, and you're standing in a spot that's not a good place for you to be standing for your personal safety. And we're saying go, you got to go, and you decide not to. And so I think you're right. We should have Corporation Counsel look at this and parse it out. I'm not saying this with the utmost confidence, but I also believe that under state code,
there is, that would, I think there's some law and some guidance saying, if there's a fire going on, you're not to stand, right near the fire, and you're supposed to listen to fire. I think firefighters also have a similar ability. So I think it does almost require that you're breaking the law already in order for an officer to give you a lawful order, but we can parse that out with legal. I would love to entertain a motion to unstrike this language and insert the word a lawful after order.
Sure. Would be a friendly amendment to unstrike, or how do we do this?
I guess we can do it. I would, if we can just move a motion to unstrike and add the word lawful after order.
Motion to unstrike and add the word lawful.
After order. Okay, great. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Burns. All those in favor of that amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Great. I would like to see this move forward to council. I do see that it appeared on the agenda for discussion, but this is the only item that I think I'd like to move forward for discussion. It does say, Councilmember Reed requests that Human Services Committee consider forwarding the foregoing item to City Council for consideration. And so I think the public was aware that we would be considering forwarding this, and there will still be several opportunities at council for folks to weigh in on this particular item. So with that, I'll take all those in favor of moving this forward to council, say aye. Aye. The ayes have it, and this will appear on the council agenda. Okay, that brings us, we have 2 items left on the agenda, and that would be HS 3, which is Ordinance 57022, Title 9, Chapter 5, Section 11, Public Nudity, Urinating and Defecating in Public. I move that item. Is there a second?
Second, I guess I'm hesitating because I don't know if it applies to the standing committees or just council, but the
Chair can move.
you can second, but you can't move things. And one of those, I know for sure.
Well, if you want to move it.
All right. Where are we at? So moved. I think you already said what it is. So moved.
Is there a second? I'll second it. I second that. So this is Ordinance 57022, Title 9, Chapter 5, Section 11, Public Nudity, Urinating and Defecating in Public. We have our interim corporation counsel from Ansel Glink here. And so this is an ordinance that, as I was doing a review of our code in line with many of the things that we discussed tonight and items that will appear on the agenda on August 1st. I looked at this ordinance regarding public nudity, and all of it made sense, except for one provision that specifically regulated the female body in a way that our code does not regulate the male body. And particularly as society is evolving and understanding the equality between men and women and the bodily autonomy that women have not been able to exercise historically, and especially as our community is, or as both our community and our society is more deeply understanding the rights of folks who are in the LGBTQ community, particularly trans folks who have various gender identities. I think that this ordinance is written in a very loose way and does not adequately cover what we, I think, really want to cover. And I'll note that, Evanston, of the North Shore communities, is one of the few I'll name off a list of North Shore communities that do not regulate the adult female body in the way that we do. And Evanston has been a leader on a number of issues, and I think it's time for us to continue being a leader and in this case, not even be a leader, but be a follower and align with our neighbors like Skokie, who does not have a toplessness ordinance. And, Skokie does not have the issues that folks are maybe concerned about. And, there's, unfortunately, because of a local blog, Evanston Now, there has been a warping and distortion of what this is about to lead people to believe that this is about topless beaches. The headline read, Reed's topless beach proposal. Nowhere was anything about beaches mentioned. Nowhere, have I, prior to that, thought about that. And just with that idea, Wilmette is a North Shore community on the lakefront. Wilmette does not have a toplessness ordinance, and there are not topless beaches in Wilmette. Winnetka is a lakefront community, just like Evanston, and they have beaches. Winnetka does not have a topless ordinance, and there are not topless beaches there. Glencoe, Highland Park, Lake Forest, Kenilworth, all North Shore communities that have lakefronts, that have beaches, and they do not have topless beaches. And they also do not have toplessness ordinances that discriminate against women. Our Constitution in Illinois, Article
And point of privilege,
Sure.
just for the sake of the discussion, what about the park districts?
And the park districts in those communities do not as well. I've looked up Wilmette, Winnetka, and many of those communities. The park district also does not have a toplessness ordinance in those communities that I've verified. And again, this ordinance does not just apply to beaches. This ordinance applies to our entire community. And so I think that is an important fact here. So with that, our law, so with that, in Illinois, the Article 1, Section 18 of the Illinois Constitution says that you cannot discriminate on the basis of sex. And it specifically says that the state and its local units of government, including park districts, do not have, and school districts do not have the ability to discriminate on the basis of sex. There has been, I received an email earlier from our interim corporation counsel going through a few cases in other states, because, what we're looking at here is, do we think this ordinance stands up to constitutional muster? And our corporation counsel, Julie Tappendorf, has sent a few cases over. This was about 4 hours ago, so I've been able to do a bit of research on these, but I have a few questions for Ms. Tappendorf to answer here. But first I'll pause and see if there are any questions or comments from the committee, and if not, I will continue forward with Ms. Tappendorf.
Just if you can, just for the sake of time, if you can frame this as, my understanding is that Council Dirk Price, in a kind of one-on-one discussion, either through email or in person, felt like if this were challenged, it would be challenged under strict scrutiny. I believe Council, what's the last name?
Tappendorf.
Council Tappendorf is of the opinion that it would be rational basis, and so I just wanted Council Tappendorf to know that, because if there's a better venue to sort this out than today, I would like to do that for the sake of time. But again, I just mainly wanted Council Tappendorf to know that. So again, if you want to decide to discuss this with Council in collaboration with Council Price first, so that it could be sorted out, and then we could be provided one kind of single opinion from Ansel McLink, I think that is what I would prefer. But just wanted to get that on the record. Thank you.
So I'm happy to jump in here. I have spoken to Dirk Price about this issue, and he had not. He had looked at this only through the scope of the memo that was provided, the report that was provided to you that had your former corporation counsel's advice. He had not performed the research and the case law research. He asked that I do that. So I, in talking to him, he did, as far as I know, and in my conversations with him, which was this morning, he had not provided an opinion that this would be subject to strict scrutiny. We understood that that was the chair's opinion, and that's why the issue was raised in the first place, that there was a concern. So, I can provide a little background on the legal construct of this. There's a Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals case that is within our circuit, so within Illinois Circuit, that analyzed Chicago's public nudity ordinance, which has similar provisions about women and covering the breast area, very similar to Evanston's ordinance. And that was challenged under the U.S. Constitution, and it was upheld under intermediate scrutiny. So I think the question, as I understand it,
if I may interrupt there, just a point of information, the U.S. Constitution does not have an equal rights amendment similar to the state of Illinois. Is that correct?
Correct. And that is where I'm going. So if you don't mind if I finish, and then I'm happy to take questions. That way, at least you have my opinion, which is consistent with the opinion in the report, which I believe came from one of your city attorneys. So first, under the U.S. Constitution, intermediate scrutiny has applied, and it's applied across the country, including in the Seventh Circuit, which is Evanston Circuit. The question that has been raised since that advice was provided is, how does the state of Illinois' Equal Rights Amendment change, if at all, the scrutiny that would be applied to an ordinance like Evanston's or Chicago's or any other Illinois state? And as your city attorney opined in their memo, there are no cases on public nudity ordinances that apply the Illinois state constitution. There are a number of cases, and I sent 5 along today, but I believe that there are others. Those were the 5 that I pulled. There are other cases where the state constitution has similar equal rights language as Illinois, and the courts have applied different standards of review, either intermediate scrutiny, which is what has been applied and upheld nudity ordinances across the country under the federal constitution, or in some cases even applied a lower standard of rational basis. I did not find, and it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I did a pretty exhaustive search. I did not find an ordinance, as I said, there isn't one in Illinois, but in any other state applying a state constitutional equal rights provision to a public nudity ordinance that applied strict scrutiny. What would an Illinois court do? What we have so far are Illinois decisions that analyze this under the federal constitution. And I think with respect to what your city attorney opined, that they felt comfortable that the city could defend this ordinance. And I agree with that. I think that there are very many arguments to look at other states where there isn't a case here, to look at other states and see how those states have analyzed similar ordinances with similar state constitutions. It's not binding, but it can be very persuasive when there isn't a case on point. In that case, an Illinois court, if somebody challenged it, and to my knowledge, I'm not aware of a current challenge or a potential challenge, but if you're asking about the defensibility of your ordinance, I would say there are good defenses both under the U.S. Constitution and the Illinois Constitution. With respect to the policy nature of making a change, obviously that's up to you in making a recommendation and up to the city council. But as to the legality, I think that there is sufficient legal, whether it's precedent or persuasive authority, to defend your current ordinance.
Thank you. I have a few questions first. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's fine. I would ask the chair that we be brief with the questions for this evening around this issue. I think we should likely table this. It still needs more time. We need to consider it. I'm not sure exactly when. I would like to review. I did not have an opportunity to review all of the information that were provided by Council Tappendorf. Also want to correct my previous statement that I may have characterized what Council Price provided as an opinion. It was more so a comment. It was a comment provided in response as a response to a question that Councilmember Reed asked, and I think in a private conversation. I'm happy to know that there has been coordination between you and Council Price and that research has been done. I would like time to review it. Again, don't think this is the venue to have a full-out debate on it now. So if we can keep the comments short, and so we have time to review this. Thank you.
See appropriate. Okay, thank you. So when I want to go to some of the things you said. Have you found cases where, because you mentioned a lot of cases and where this was potentially a similar ordinance was overturned. Have you found cases where this similar ordinance, was upheld, my apologies, where a similar ordinance was upheld? Have you found examples where this was overturned?
Based on a state constitution?
Based on either
not.
State or federal?
I believe there may be a federal case out of Colorado. Mm-hmm. It's just one sort of isolated case. I don't believe it was under a state constitution analysis. It may have been under a federal constitution. I'm not really sure if the language of the particular ordinance that was being challenged was exactly the same.
Yes.
There are dozens of cases that have upheld similar ordinances. I believe there's one it might have been Fort Collins, so it might have been out of Colorado.
Yes, so there's the Fort Collins case out of Colorado, yes, that used intermediate scrutiny and upheld this. Also, in Illinois, how are sex-based discrimination cases, what level of scrutiny are they often decided under?
So if a court determines that there is
I'm sorry, let me rephrase that question. Let me actually rephrase that question. Specifically cases that have brought up Article 1, Section 18 of the Illinois Constitution in Illinois, how have those cases that have utilized that particular section of our Constitution, how have those cases, what level of scrutiny have those cases used?
It depends on, first, the initial inquiry of the court to determine whether there is any unequal treatment. If it's determined that there is unequal treatment that is not justified in some way, and this is the cases that I sent to you sort of go through that analysis. It's very similar in these other states. If there is determined to be unequal treatment without any basis for that, then it's subject to strict scrutiny. The cases that I sent to you look at that initial issue. Is there unequal treatment where there is a nature basis for why there's a difference in the treatment in the ordinance? Mm-hmm. And we don't have a case in Illinois applying
specifically
exactly, to a public nudity ordinance.
Yeah. So you sent 5 cases. So there's State v. Lilly. That was the first one, and that was out of the State v. Lilly was out of Kansas. And did that have to do with did that case have to do with an ordinance similar to ours, or was that just generally about public nudity?
I'd have to look. I've got all 5 cases sort of strewn on my desk, but I can take notes. And since this is coming back, it might be as I think it was it Councilmember Burns,
correct,
who stated that that this may not be the venue to do sort of a legal analysis, mm-hmm. but if there are questions and you want maybe a little more than just the cases, we can provide a memo.
Okay, yeah. So I would love to. I was able to quickly peek at that one. It doesn't seem like that one necessarily fits, but It does seem like some of them do. There's Seattle v. Buchanan that you mentioned, so I'd love an analysis of that. There's the city of Albuquerque v. Sachs that you mentioned, that one seems to apply, and potentially city of Albuquerque v. Sachs as well. I'm sorry, I named that twice. So there are a few of the cases that you sent that seem to apply, so I'd love an analysis there. And particularly, I'd love an analysis of how specifically cases that have used Article 1, Section 18, what level of scrutiny they've been decided under. And I just also am curious, you said that you believe this case is defensible, and so if you've come to that conclusion, I'm just curious how, to come to that conclusion, we'd have to say, right, I think the first level that you said is, whether there is, if you want to repeat it, if there's discrimination.
Right. So, and this is something that I can flesh out a little better in a memo, since this seems to be a question. So I want to clarify, I'm not saying that the ordinance will be upheld in court.
Yeah,
Lawyers
you're saying it's
don't do
defensible.
that.
Yeah,
And
I'm not,
if
yeah.
they do,
I'm,
they are not good lawyers. So what I'm saying is that the ordinance is defensible. And what that means is that the city has available defenses under the law that it can make in court to defend against a challenge. So whether that is that it's a rational basis test or it's an intermediate scrutiny test, that there are bases for defending this ordinance. And the distinction, and so much of this is spelled out in these cases that I sent, the way the courts look at the distinction between how the ordinance treats men and women, that this is not on its face discrimination against women. It is not expression or speech, but it is a public nudity conduct ordinance. So it regulates the conduct of all people. And the issue that's raised about the distinction, that there's case law that talks about that it just distinguishing between men and women on its own is not discrimination. So if there's a basis for that, and I think that's where it gets so much into the legal argument. So I think it's defensible. Is it 100% win? No lawyer should tell you that. But I think that there are defenses to this based on the case law, both in the Seventh Circuit on the federal side and in some of the other cases that I sent to you on the state side.
Mm-hmm. I would love particularly an analysis of how the city might defend this. And thank you for that, Ms. Tappendorf. I will continue on and just say that when reading the Fort Collins case, which went to the Court of Appeals in the 10th Circuit in 2019, the judge who decided, the panel of judges who decided the case, who happened to be Obama appointees and not Trump or Reagan or whatever appointees, said one of the most important purposes to be served by the equal, and so what they say is that often the defenses for these kinds of ordinances, and it was raised here on this dais the last time we were here, is an objection about I'm citing from the case, reading from the case. For one thing, in asserting that that a female-only toplessness ban substantially furthers governmental objectives, the city mostly relies on cases holding that nebulous concepts of public morality, not traffic safety or public order, justify similar bans. In one of those cases, for example, the Fourth Circuit tied a public nudity ordinance like the city's in the case that I'm discussing, the Fort Collins case, to a widely recognized governmental interest in protecting the moral sensibilities of that substantial segment of society that still does not want to be exposed willy-nilly to public displays of various portions of their fellow citizens' anatomies that traditionally in this society have been regarded as erogenous zones, portions that still include, whether justifiably or not in the eyes of all, the female but not male breast. And so that is the United States v. Bionic. For another thing, although the city itself never asserted public morality as a justification for banning female toplessness, notions of morality may well underlie its assertions that conflicts will break out and distracted drivers will crash if it allows women to be topless in public. But such notions, like the fear that topless women will endanger children, originate from the sex object stereotypes of women's breast. As we've explained, that stereotype does not stand up to scrutiny. One of the most important purposes to be served by the Equal Protection Clause is to ensure that public sensibilities grounded in prejudice and unexamined stereotypes do not become enshrined as a part of official policy of the government. And so what's left is what this says. A female-only toplessness ban strikes us as an unnecessary and overbroad means to maintain public order and to promote traffic safety when more accurate and impartial lines can be drawn. Striking down and so what is at stake here is how do we define female breast? And if you want to go to the textbook, and I'll ask you this, if you maybe have an answer. If you don't, then that's fine. But what is if anyone or Director Ogbo, if someone wants to answer, what is a female breast? What makes a breast a female breast?
I'd like to jump in.
Well, hold on. Can anyone, unless you're answering that question, if you're not answering that question, I have a
Okay, I don't think anybody's going to answer it, so you can continue.
Council Tappendorf, if you were to defend this, and if you're not prepared now to answer that, that's fine. But how would you define a female breast if you were defending this in court?
Yeah, so there are many cases that look at this because this has been litigated across the country for decades in connection with sexually oriented businesses or adult uses. So this isn't something that we pull out of a hat. Mm-hmm. Whenever you're defending in court, you look at precedent. So you look at cases. There are numerous cases all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court that interpret, and you certainly looking at say a topless ban at an adult use, say a strip joint, mm-hmm. The definition shouldn't be any different than in a public nudity ordinance. That shouldn't be any different to any other ordinance that's interpreted. There's, as with many words, like the word missile, which we talked about mm-hmm. before, there's just a basis in the law for these. So we would look, if we didn't find something in the code, if the code itself didn't define it, then you look at dictionaries, and then you look at how the courts have defined it. Mm-hmm. So do I have a definition for you right now? I do not.
Okay, yeah.
I would research that.
Yeah, and that's actually something I'd love to see researched. And I think that's actually, to me, that is one of the most critical questions, how we define what a female breast is. Because if we're going to say that this law is not arbitrary, and what the other, and particularly what this court has said, there are many, breasts that resemble female breasts. There are men, many of the cases, I would say, have been decided woefully wrong. Just like many of us would say, yes, it is the precedent of the Supreme Court now that women do not have bodily autonomy, and that certain states can create laws that would limit their right to abortion, and we'd say that's wrong. And here in our community, we can make and in our state, we make laws that go against the Supreme Court's inaccurate reading of the statute. But I would say it's quite simple when you look it up. The definition of a female breast is a breast that has mammary glands. I don't know if there are cases that define it in any other way, and so I'd love for you to look into this and see whether or not there are alternative cases that somehow define female breast as something other than breasts that have mammary glands. And if we're saying that what we are trying to control is breasts that have mammary glands in public and not just breasts that present as female breasts, then that would mean that someone who is a trans woman would be allowed to go topless in our community, and because those breasts happen to not have mammary glands. That would mean, and if we are to say that trans woman could be arrested under this statute, then could a trans man be arrested under the statute? Would a trans man have female breasts? And so for our trans community, and I've had people reach out, both women in our community, I've had trans folks reach out, and their allies reach out. And this, in my opinion, creates a lot of confusion. And I think if we want to regulate toplessness in our community, I think we can regulate it in a gender-neutral way without specifically naming female breast. When there are plenty of breast, again, there's gynecomastia, there are trans folks, there are plenty of female breast, traditionally under the biological definition, that would fit this category, and we are perfectly fine with those being presented in public. And I'll close with this on this item, and I agree that we certainly need more analysis. This comes from Elizabeth Cady Stanton and the folks in 1848 when the Declaration of Sentiments was released. And one of the sentiments that they stated was, speaking on all of the grievances against men, they say, "He has created a false public sentiment by giving to the world a different code of morals for men and women, by which moral delinquencies which exclude women from society are not only tolerated, but deemed of little account in man." Again, in our city, it is perfectly fine for a man to go topless, even if that man has a chest that presents in the same way that a woman's chest would present, and that is perfectly legal. And I think we need to re-examine this law and write it in a gender-neutral way that either excludes all breasts that present as female, or or eliminate the statute altogether. And so, with that, I would entertain a motion to table this.
And I just wanted to say again, I think the matter at hand for me fundamentally is, the first question is, does this violate any equal protection language in our state statute? That is the first question I have, and I think that will be somewhat determined by the level of scrutiny that our law department and interim counsel believes that this will go under. Will fall under, and at that point, once we have that information, I think it is very clear, I think, where the chair stands on this issue, and we will move, and why we will move this forward, and it'll be up to the individuals of this body to determine whether or not they agree with that direction. But I appreciate the chair's explanation. Hopefully we can record this so we can play it again at future meetings, or the people can play it for themselves, because I think your stance is clear. I think people know where you're coming from, but again, it may come down to whether or not what what our interim counsel believe, whether or not they believe this is defensible, and it'll be up to the individuals on this council to determine whether or not we want to change this by a court order, or to keep it in play until one of our community members challenges it. So that's what's at hand here. But thank you for the discussion, and I will make that motion to table this, not to a date certain, just to table it.
Second.
Okay. With the motion to table in order, thank you, Councilmember Burns. Thank you, Council Tappendorf, for looking at this. Oh, I'm sorry, Director Ogbo.
Yeah, absolutely.
gonna say Councilmember Newsome.
Yeah, I just need a direction as to what meeting this will be tabled to. Is it an immediate meeting? Or
I will, as chair, discuss that with you, and we'll work with Council Tappendorf. I would imagine that this would come back within, if not the next meeting, the meeting afterward. Yeah. I'm sorry. Oh. Okay, yeah, either in August or September, yes. Okay, with that, I wanted to make one further comment. Yeah, I wanted to make one further comment, but I don't remember what that is, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. And then there's one last item on our agenda, and somehow we skipped over. If that is the daily crime bulletin, so that'd be items for communication, HS2. Chief Cook. I mean, people called me Clerk Reed for quite a while after I became a council member, and So this is item HS2, distribution of the portion of the daily crime bulletin that includes the names and addresses of persons arrested in the city. Is there a motion for that?
Yeah, motion.
I just read it.
Yeah.
So
motion,
moved. Is there a second?
HS2.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Burns, seconded by Councilmember Hadid-Cadiz. I just want to lay the foundation. Is that fine?
I would like to kick us off.
Oh, go ahead, Councilmember Burns.
Because I just want to get straight to the point. So, Council Tappendorf, have you been able to review is it statute? Mm-hmm. State statute cited in this, in our packet today?
So I've not been asked to look at this or opine on this, but I'm familiar with, you're talking about the reporting of arrests, correct?
Correct. And
yeah, I'm familiar with the law.
Okay.
It's not something that I was asked to look at, but I hopefully be able to answer your questions.
And I think what I'm trying to understand is if the city has to proactively publish the crime bulletin, including names and addresses, on a website, in an email newsletter, if we have to proactively publish it and push these names out in order to be in compliance with the state statute cited in our packet.
So what the statute says is that it has to be that certain information, and that includes the name and address, has to be furnished no later than 72 hours after the arrest. So typically that's made available to the press. That's usually who's filed a request for that information. And they are entitled, just as anyone that files a Freedom of Information Act request, for the information, including the name and address.
And you said something important, Counsel. So again, your reading is that furnishing doesn't mean we need to proactively publish this without any request being made. This is upon request, is your interpretation of the statute. The requirement.
The statute that you've cited, this particular statute provides. If you're asking if there's other statutes that require some sort of a publication, we'd have to look into that. I'm familiar with this statute. In fact, I have it up on my screen right now. And it simply says that this information has to be furnished. So it could be upon request. Typically, the communities I work with provide it to the press. So they have an arrest blotter, and then the press has requested that, and so that's regularly provided.
But if the city were to have it ready and upon request provided to the requester, would we be in compliance with this state statute, the one that is cited in the packet?
With the one in the packet, correct. There may be other laws, and again, I wasn't asked to look at this, but I'm happy to do so.
Okay, yeah. So I would. So again, if this is the only statute that is to guide our decision around this issue, I would support, again, not proactively releasing it, but upon your investigation of this. If there are other statutes that that we need to review to make this determination, I'm happy to review that. That is all, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I certainly agree. My interpretation of the statute is that we do not have to proactively release. And also, Council Tappendorf, in that within that same statute, it also cites that, for example, a mugshot. It doesn't use the word mugshot, I don't think, but a mugshot. Can you just provide the language of the things that it says must be released within that furnished within that 72-hour period?
Right. So it's chronologically maintained arrest and criminal history information, and that includes information that identifies the individual, including the name, age, address, and photograph. Information detailing any charges relating to the arrest, the time and location of the arrest, the name of the investigating or arresting law enforcement agency, if the individual is incarcerated, the amount of any bail or bond, and if the individual is incarcerated, the time and date that the individual was received into, discharged from, or transferred from the arresting agency's custody. So that is the type of arrest reports that must be furnished within 72 hours. And again, they're typically provided to the press who've requested that. We can kind of skip over the criminal history records. Those are a little different, and that's usually upon request under FOIA. There is a fairly recent amendment within the last couple of years that talk about booking photographs, which you mentioned are also known as mugshots. And this provision states that law enforcement agencies cannot publish mugshots on social networking websites, so Facebook, Instagram, and that, for certain offenses. So civil offenses, petty offenses, business offenses. In other words, sort of the more mild or lesser charges than the felony charges and that. Then you could use your social media to publish the mugshots.
Okay, thank you. And so, Chief Eddington, it's just, Chief Cook just rolls off the tongue. I think it's just the C. It's the double C. Chief Eddington, the police department currently doesn't proactively release photos, the booking photo of folks. Is that correct?
That's true.
And the police department also, in the daily crime bulletin, does not include information about the bond or any of that stuff and where they've been transported to from Evanston.
If we do a press release, that
But in the daily crime bulletin.
the bulletin, no.
Yeah, it doesn't include that there. So, I think, that I think we haven't, I'm looking forward to our council looking further into this to make sure that there are no other laws that require us to proactively release this information. I think we've decided with the booking photos and with the bond information and a whole host of other information that we have decided that we're not going to proactively release that information. And I think particularly with the distribution of, the crime bulletin that includes the names and addresses of folks arrested, I think that also would fall under the area of we should not proactively release it. And so I'd like to see this come back, not to just accept and place this on file because there's a referral made to create a policy. And so I would looking forward to seeing this come back to our next meeting as a policy that would no longer allow the police department to proactively release this information under certain circumstances. Yeah, if someone, obviously if we're looking for someone, if there's a fugitive on this, and that has nothing to do with this, but, of course, if there's a fugitive, we want to find them, we want to post information about them, but just someone who's been arrested, I don't think we need to proactively release that. I see that you want to.
If I may,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, there's a couple of real world logistics we're going to have to deal with. Once again, I'm sure we have the representative from NU here. What they're going to do, if we do this policy, it's going to be, here's our standing request for this information daily. I mean, I don't want to create a situation where there's an expectation by the city council that this information isn't going to be going out the door, because they're going to ask for it.
Of course, yeah.
And so what I'm saying is we're going to do this loop and policy, and at the end of the day, I'm going to get a couple of pieces of paper from Evanston Now, the Daily Northwestern, the Chicago Tribune, WGN saying, we want it every day, Chief, here you go, here's our request. And so practically, where are we going? Now, in that context, I think we, the city, have done some things that are way ahead of even the state law. I don't think we've ever done mugshots on social media, ever. We just have never done that. And I think our policies are honed to, we're trying to be reasonable about what goes out the door and how that information is distributed. And we're proactive, especially compared to a lot of our peers in this arena, that are much more willing to push everything out the door, including the mug photos. And I think we need to remain a compliance with the applicable laws in FOIA. And once again, I'm all about managing the expectations of we asked the lawyer to do some research, which he will, but at the end of the day, she's already told us that upon request, you got to give it up. And
yes.
so I'm telling you, these are smart folks. They're just going to ask. I mean, that's how this works. And even with our reluctance to release mug photos, most of the Evanston media has found a way around that to get the mug photos from other sources. Mm-hmm. And so I appreciate, we want to be guarded in this. I think the police department has proactively reflected that stance, but I think that we're about to go to a place that your expectations aren't going to be met.
Yeah, I just don't want to confuse our expectations. I know my expectation is not that this information will never be released. I, as a former FOIA officer, understand FOIA quite well and understand that folks have access to all kinds of stuff that we may not want released. You know, so anyone can go and FOIA all of my emails, and so. You know, so I think we're very clear that this can be released. I just want to, so I'll add for Counsel Tappendorf and Ansel Glink to, you know, again, as a former FOIA officer, I would say there's nothing in FOIA that would conflict with this, us no longer releasing it. But certainly, if Ansel Glink wants to look into the FOIA implications, I'd be happy to have him look into that as well. And, you know, and I see Councilmember Burns has his light on.
No, because I don't know if also the concern is that this would lead to additional work for our FOIA officers, because they would have to continue to furnish it, you know, one person at a time. I don't know if that's the concern, but I think there's a way to get around that too, you know, where we're still not emailing it out, but, you know, we're making it available. Maybe it's a secured link with a passcode, but it's because it has to be, it sounds like the statute is saying it has to, you have to have it, you have to keep it, you have to know this information. And you need to furnish it when requested, but you have to gather it all up or keep it in a way in which it can be released. So I think how we release that, we can work on that in a way that wouldn't add, you know, additional work to our FOIA officer at the police department. We can think through that, but I think there's a middle ground that won't create unreasonable new work for the FOIA officer in the police department, but also won't require us to push it out in an email or anything like that.
Since I'm calling people by their predecessor's name, Councilmember Fleming.
Chief Eddington, do you know if there's any police departments who have strictly like a searchable website that has this information rather than email? Does anyone do it that way?
I'm unfamiliar with it. We can look into it. That should be a relatively. I'm certain there are that depending on state laws and state statutes and laws and their local versions of FOIA. I'm sure that's an option, because I would have presumed that somebody's been smart enough to say, once we put this in the computer and enter the data once, we can have this portal that looks at this. So I'm sure it exists. I'm just not familiar with it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And
Just real quick, I was just going to say that, I mean, I think that's one of the options. I mean, one of the options, if we really want to secure, so we want to create a barrier, is like to have some portal where they need a passcode, et cetera. But that was one thought I had too. It could just be a link on the website and you know where it is. We don't have that many media. Like, you just keep pointing to the same place. It's there. If you want to do something with it, go ahead, you know.
Yeah, my thank you, Councilmember Burns and Councilmember Ruth Simmons and Hedy Cottis. I agree. I think there is a way to ensure that we are not creating more work. Again, the record has to be created, has to be maintained. I just want to note that someone can't make a standing FOIA. Like, you can't place a record and just say, hey, I'd like to FOIA this record every day. You'd actually have to go through the process of actually filing that FOIA every single day. And only media would be allowed to, make a request every single day. And I doubt that most media, because there's an exemption for media and anyone else would be deemed a recurrent requester. And so this would create a barrier for media. I doubt that, anyone other than maybe Evanston now would have the time to make the FOIA every day, and I think that would even be a burden for their team. So I would imagine that these would come in on a, maybe a weekly basis, a monthly basis, and just get all of it. I can't imagine, again, other than maybe one publication doing it on a daily basis. So I think we can look into that. And since we're on the topic, if it is the desire, I would like to end the public distribution of this and require a FOIA for it. But if it is the desire of this committee to create a website where we're going to put all this information up, right? These are residents who have not been convicted of a crime, and they are simply accused of a crime, and we're going to put their name, their address, their information on a city website. I think, because it is also FOIA-able information, that all police misconduct records, right? If a police officer violates someone's rights here, that is a FOIA-able record. And so if we're proactively releasing information on our residents that could be embarrassing, harmful, and they haven't been found guilty, I think we need to do the exact same thing with our law enforcement officers and create a website where we, in that similar link, where we put all of the accusations that residents have made against law enforcement. And if folks aren't willing to also support that, if we're not willing to also say that our law enforcement officers need to have the same standards as our residents and need to have a public website disclosing information that they have not been found guilty of, if that is not your agreement, then I think that is something we'll have to explain to our voters. But I think we should be able to find agreement that we should hold our residents and law enforcement to the same standard. That is my goal. And so.
Chairman,
Oh, yes, Ms. Tappendorf.
sorry, I was looking for a raised hand or something, but I didn't
Yes,
see
I
anything.
probably wouldn't have seen it anyhow, so thank you for jumping in.
Yes, I just wanted to just raise two issues. Number one, this statute trumps FOIA. With respect to just the records that I named that have to be maintained and furnished. It is a shorter statutory time frame, and a requester does not have to file a FOIA request. They can, but they don't have to. This statute provides a faster way, and it's usually the press that asks for this, but it could be other people, to gather information about arrests and the details about it. So who got arrested and that. So I think we have to be careful not to, the question of whether it has to be published. I think, I'm not aware of any statute besides this one. We'll certainly ask around and take a look. But my guess is that there isn't a statute that requires you to email it out or publish it. That's going to be a policy decision. But you do have to create the record, you have to maintain it, and you have to provide it within 72 hours. So you can't rely solely on FOIA for this and say if a newspaper requested it, it does need to be treated differently than a traditional FOIA and that's just how that statute has been treated. The other thing, and this is sort of maybe not so related, before you decide to create a website and publish police complaints, you'd want to have there are protections and different statutes that apply to that. So we would want to look at that. So,
Yeah,
and I'm sure you wouldn't do that without engaging your legal counsel on
Then
that.
I am engaging legal counsel at this point because I think if we're moving forward with a citizen database, it would be included in my desire would be to include in that same policy creating a database that is mirrored for law enforcement. In Chicago, with their COPA and other boards have done similar action where they post all of the information. I've actually worked with Jamie Calvin and the Invisible Institute and others to vet this. When I was clerk, I put forward a policy, also working with Lovey and Lovey to determine the legality of this. So we've done, while I was clerk, the legal legwork to ensure that this is as it pertains to police records legal. But I'd love to have you all. I'm always a fan of second opinions, whether it's a doctor or a lawyer, and so happy to have you all, as well as we've had Lovey and Lovey, a renowned civil rights and FOIA and OMA firm. In fact, the case, the 2018 case, Jamie Calvin, Calvin v. City of Chicago, was litigated by the attorney that helped us do the research. Matt Topic. This is the last one.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, in the context of Evanston and the issues that we're facing and what we occurred just tonight where the complaints against officers were reviewed in public on camera, I'm not sure that this is a necessary or needed step here, and I want to call to your attention that and emphasize what the attorney said, that there's a lot of minefields here, not only legal ones but officer retention ones that I would please be cautious in your consideration of this. There's other factors that we have to juggle as a city, and I think too, if you look at what the city's doing vis-a-vis its scrutiny of law enforcement, is substantial. It is substantial.
I would agree with you, and we want to wrap up because we have another committee meeting that's starting soon. I would certainly agree with you, but I worry about resident retention the same way that I worry about officer retention. I want to make sure that our residents have the same level of, we give our residents and law enforcement the same level of respect. So that's all I'm looking for, is what's good for the goose is good for the gander, is what my grandmother would always say. And if it's good for law enforcement to not have their names and addresses read here, because we don't say the name of the officer, we don't say the address of the officer. I think that is a similar standard we should hold for residents for retention. Did you have something final, and then we'll close out?
Yeah, I just wanted to recap on the legal analysis and review that we requested from council, because I've forgotten some of them. So could we just do a final recap? I don't know if you know, or Council Tappendorf, you were keeping track.
Yeah, we have two.
I am a note taker. I've been taking prolific notes. I've got asterisks all over the place. I'm pretty sure I've got a good sense of what you're looking for.
Perfect.
You know, timing, I can reach out to city staff to sort of talk about the timing, and I've got looking at what a lawful order is. There is case law on that, by the way. Looking at and preparing a memo on the potential gender discrimination claims and the defensibility of the public nudity ordinance. I have that. That's an analysis. Included in that would be looking at the definition of breast, looking at the scrutiny levels, and then this last one, although I'm pretty sure I know the answer, that there is no statute that requires any sort of affirmative publication of the arrest information. I just, I have it written down just to confirm that. And then last
is the same thing for police officers.
Yes, and that, I think it's probably premature to do any research now until we know if we have a sense of what it is that you're looking to publicize, because that will make a big difference.
Yeah, I will send you a memo that the clerk's office issued, but it's essentially just complaint registers is what we'd be looking to release, and all of the accompanying data.
Yeah, and if the city's already received a memo on this and we're just looking for a second opinion, that would be helpful as well.
Okay, I will share that with you. Seeing that it is 6:59 and there is a land use commission, I believe, that is about to start here, and a lot of folks waiting for it. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all for joining us.